Welcome, everyone. I think I'm going to go ahead and get started because we have some amazing content to get through today in a jam-packed 30-minute webinar that we're so excited to present to you. So welcome and thank you so much for being here. We're looking forward to this conversation with our dear friend, Garry Ridge. If you have not joined one of our webinars before, let me just give you a little bit of background. My name is Ashley Virtue. I'm with the National Conflict Resolution Center, and we started these webinars about a couple of years ago, really in response to the fact that workplace leaders were coming to us saying, we really feel like we are navigating new and uncharted territory when it comes to being a workplace leader. We feel like, there are just new challenges, new questions happening all the time. And right now, that feels more true than ever, I think. And so we have had conversations around everything from overcoming political polarization in the workplace and how to create a team of effective upstanders, how to manage a multi-generational workforce effectively, and even the challenging topics like the changing trends in DE&I initiatives. And so we are here, we as NCRC really believe that having the difficult conversations matters, that being in the space of navigating some of those questions and wrestling with some of those issues, especially as leaders, is of the utmost importance. And again, especially now. So that's why we started this series. And it just feels so timely to have Garry on so that we can talk about leadership today. And so Garry and I met a couple of years ago and at another conference, and I feel like, instantly learned so much from one another and connected on leadership styles, but also on, I think, genuine curiosity. I have always appreciated that Garry has such genuine curiosity about those around him, and I think that's part of the reason that Garry has been so successful and learned so much as a leader. For those of you who don't know Garry, he spent 25 years as chairman and CEO of the WD-40 company and really had some amazing lessons that came out of that tenure. Garry has also written two amazing books already. I happen to have them both. One is Helping People Win at Work, which he co-authored with our good friend Ken Blanchard. And then he also wrote The Unexpected Learning Moment, and I can't recommend them highly enough. I have read them both and they're wonderful. But today we're so thrilled because just in a couple of days, Garry's new book, Any Dumbass Can Do It, Learning Moments from an Everyday CEO of a Multi-Billion-Dollar Company, is being released. And if you are here with us at the end of this webinar, we're going to kind of take a look at everyone who's on for the whole time. And we actually have 50 free copies of the book to give away. So what we'll do is let everyone know tomorrow who the 50 winners are, just because we don't want to take up more of your time to post them all in chat today. But we'll send a big email out tomorrow and let you know who the free winners are, and we will connect with you to get that sent to you. But that is very exciting. I know we'll learn a lot from you here today, Garry, and we'll learn a lot from your book as well. So welcome, Garry Ridge.
Hey, thank you. G'day, Ashley. It's a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, Garry, let's dive on in because, like I said, we have a lot of content to cover, and I know everyone is excited to jump into it. So you have this new book coming out, and I absolutely love the title. Any Dumbass Can Do It. It just it's so captivating, and also it's just, you're right. It's your brand humility in it, which I love. So I've benefited from years now from your learning moments, as you call them, learning moments from your career, and you continue to share them out every day with those of us lucky enough to be on your email list. And every time I talk to you, one thing you talk about is constantly building great cultures, which sounds amazing, but is a very tall order. So if any dumbass can do it, how? How do we do it?
Well, firstly, culture is truly a competitive advantage.
Mm.
And I often say, imagine a place where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to something bigger than yourself, you learn something new, you're protected and you're set free by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. And there's an add to that too, because happy people create happy families create happy communities create a happy world. And I think we'd all agree a little happier world right now would not be a bad thing. But in dumbass language, and I am now the dean of dumbassery, I will give you the three most important things that need to be in place to build a great culture. Number one is, do you feel like and are you treated as if you belong? One of the biggest desires we have as human beings, and Maslow talks about it in his hierarchy to self-actualization, is belonging. So, what are you doing in your organization to make sure that people feel like and they know they belong? Secondly, is do you feel like and is it shown that you matter? And people want to know that they matter, that their work matters, that they matter as a human being. And then thirdly, do you have a set of values in the organization that set people free so that they can make choices around what it is they can do without what I call quacking up the hierarchy, looking for that, high level corporate royalty person to make a decision. So pretty simply, those as a start, those are the things you could think about.
Think so much about, obviously our work is in, conflict management and in communication skills and strategy. And I think that idea of creating belonging for people is so important. So much conflict comes out of a feeling of not belonging, of feeling like you are, on the fringe or the other, or you're not included. And from there, people go into defense mechanism mode where they have to self-protect. And so when you create that space, that culture where people feel that despite all their differences, there's a space for them, I'm sure just even conflict reduces in that moment.
Yeah, and it's sad when you look at the latest results that have come out from Gallup just this January. Employee engagement in the US is at a 10-year low. 31% of people go to work every day and they're engaged. And the thing that's really scary is that the biggest group of people are those under 35 because they feel disconnected. They don't feel like they belong. And we've caused a lot of this as we've sent our businesses into isolation. When we're in COVID, it was mandated that we couldn't be together. But now I challenge leaders, are they being brave enough to bring people together? Not because you don't think they're productive at home, but so that they have we talked about this, on another occasion, and I loved it, Ashley, where you talked about those micro conflicts, I think you
Micro
called them.
disagreements. Yeah, that we
Yes.
need more of those in our life to keep in practice.
Yeah. And we're losing it because we're not having, that micro disagreement, which is I'll push you out of the way at the water cooler. But that's what it's about.
Yeah, and just for context for everyone, I am not suggesting you go out and start fights. But we were on another podcast together a couple of weeks ago, Hearts Not Heads, highly recommend it. And we were talking about how kind of as a society, I was sharing, I feel like we've gotten a little out of practice in how to disagree well. And that shows up in our workplaces, right? Because as in workplaces, we're supposed to disagree a little bit, right? We're supposed to challenge ideas and innovate and try new things. And so we kind of, when we lost those few years of those little tiny, just everyday interactions where we had to push ourselves to kind of work with somebody who might not see eye to eye with us, it was challenging to come out of. So that's the context for what we were talking about. Don't start fights at the grocery store. Um, so Garry, I really appreciate your take on joy. You talk a lot about joy in the workplace, how to experience it and how to create it as a leader. But I have to admit right now, I do think a lot of us are struggling to find and create joy because the landscape is so tumultuous. I think we feel like the ground is shifting underneath us all the time. Policies are changing, rules are changing. Leading is hard. What answers do I have? How do I give them? And so, how as these big important issues shift quickly and move, how as an executive did you handle pivoting in tumultuous times, and what advice do you have for leaders right now?
Well, let's talk about joy as a foundation. Joy is not, the 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 thing of the day. Creating joy in a workplace isn't about gimmicks or perks, but about fostering an environment where people feel valued, connected, and empowered. And from my experience, organizations that cultivate true workplace happiness prioritize a few elements, and I'll share some of those. Firstly, it's psychological safety. Do people, and they must feel safe to express ideas, admit mistakes, and take risks without the fear of retribution. And that's what I call, the power of the learning moment. And do we have a compelling purpose? People find joy in knowing their work contributes to something bigger than themselves. I've already mentioned the culture of belonging. Teams should feel, like I say, a tribe. Now, when I talk about tribe, I'm not talking about some indigenous group. I'm talking about how mankind started, which is we were tribal, and the tribe is a group of people that come together to protect and feed each other. There has to be empathetic leaders who replace their ego with empathy and create trust and deep connections, opportunities for growth and learning. People find joy in progress, so organizations should encourage continuous learning and skill development. Certainly, how important is recognition and celebration? Acknowledge effort, not just results. Trust. Micromanagement kills joy. And I have a special guest here I'll bring onto the this is, for those of you who don't know him, this is now renamed Alec or Alice, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Inc. And I talk about this person in my book, but they are the ultimate micromanager. You need to have a values-driven environment. And let's talk about something that's really important: love and forgiveness. And it's okay to love your people for what they deliver to your organization. And then let's have a little fun and be playful. Um, you know, Workplaces don't have to be these boring things where we've all got stuck up shirts and not having fun. Let's have some fun. So joy is not about pizzas and popcorn. It's about a foundation based on some of the elements that I've just shared, which create that place of belonging and that place of where I matter in an organization, and not what this
Not,
person does.
don't be
Alice.
Alec or Alice. Yeah.
Yes.
And I was going to ask you about this, but I think you kind of just tapped into it. I think there's this balance, right, between joy and then toxic positivity, where you almost seem like you've just got your head in the sand and you're not looking at the real issues. And what I'm hearing from you is that joy isn't brushing over things, joy isn't distracting your team from the hard things with pizza and popcorn. Joy is the culture of we're happy to be here together to work on this hard thing, but that hard thing can exist.
Oh, you're absolutely. Leadership is having a heart of gold and a backbone of steel. It's
Mm.
the balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted. And it's not either or, it's both and. And, if you think about tough-minded and tender-hearted, if you're a leader that's at the extreme of either end of those, then your people feel vulnerable and at risk. And, if I talk a little bit more about Alec, some of the behaviors that really create toxic cultures. He or she has this big ego. They are a micromanager. They think they're royalty. They love a fear-based culture. They're a master of control. They're a know-it-all. They don't value learning. They must always be right. They have all the answers, even the wrong ones, and they hate feedback and they don't keep their commitments. So some of the things that you want to make sure are not in an organization versus if we think about a servant leader in an organization, a servant leader, number one, loves and involves their people. They're always in servant leadership mode. They're expected to be competent. They're connected. They're asking people, and it's the first chapter in my book. It's, are you okay? How are you today? And they treasure the gift of feedback. So these elements in place create this platform where people feel and know that they belong and that they matter.
Yeah, and I think that, so much of our work together ties in so closely because that sense of, you even mentioned constructive feedback, and we do a lot of training because all of our training is around difficult conversations in the workplace, whatever that may be. And we're constantly asked about a topic like constructive feedback. And there's that feeling that like that doesn't work well with a culture of joy or culture of positivity. And in fact, it's the opposite, right? When you have a great leader who is great at giving you feedback so that you feel supported, and yes, there's accountability in that, but you feel supported and that you are being looked at and helped to nurture and grow in the right way. Feedback is not a bad thing. It's this wonderful thing that you can celebrate as a team. So I appreciate your take on that. I want to mention to our audience, because some of you are already starting to do it, and I'm so grateful that we are going to have a few minutes for some questions from the audience. And so if you have any right now, please feel free to start populating them into the chat and we'll take a look at those. Also, a couple of you have already asked if I could repeat the name of that wonderful podcast, and it is Hearts Not Heads. So Hearts Not Heads, and that will be available to take a look at later when we do the recap email also. So one more question for you, Garry, before we get to a couple of the audience questions. So our work at NCRC is obviously all about kind of communication strategies in those difficult conversations. So we know and we recognize that conflict management is a part of any leader's job. I mean, you just have to go in knowing that that is going to be a part of your responsibilities, that it's inevitable, but it is manageable. And so what are some of the best kind of conflict resolution skills that you've learned in your career?
Well, the first one, I think, which is really foundational, is there a clear understanding of what we expect from each other? Because most conflict, I believe, is triggered by a misunderstanding of expectation. And in the book that I wrote with Ken Blanchard, where I talk about don't mark my paper, help me get an A, the whole basis of that is if an A walked in the room, what would it look like? What do I expect from you? What do you expect from me? And then I'm going to commit to helping you get that A, and you're going to commit to helping me get my A. So when we get into a conversation, we don't have what is this rampant disease in organizations that I call the na disease. It's the finger pointing disease, right? People are finger pointing because we're not clear. The second one is don't protect your comfort zone at the expense of someone else's development. And that's so, so true. How many times have we been in a situation, and let's call it a conflict or let's call it a redirection conversation, which I kind of like better, where we are protecting our comfort zone because these interactions are not necessarily that enjoyable, particularly if you're not clear about expectations. So, and then have them with a servant heart. I mean you no harm. I'm here for us together to get to a solution together. It's not about you. It's not about me. It's about this issue, what we're about. So again, I think, expectations clear, having bravery. One of the biggest learning moments one of the thousands of learning moments I've had, and when I look back, I say, if only I was brave enough to have that conversation earlier, this thing would never have escalated to the point that it is. So be brave.
I couldn't agree more when you talk about something like expectations. I think so often we see that typically when we look at a conflict or disagreement, what we are presented with is the complaint, right? That's very surface level. And we talk about this in our work all the time. Sometimes we get so caught up in fixing the complaint that we forget to look at what the underlying need is, the actual interests of the people involved. And having unmet expectations, right, is so frequently one of the underlying needs. And so you can continue to fix the surface level complaint all you want. But if that underlying need is not met, you will continue to have newer and newer ones. So I think you're exactly right about that.
Hmm.
Um, all right. So We have a couple of really great questions that have come in. We have many, these are all wonderful, but I'm going to go in order here. So, one is, how can a hiring manager identify people who will fit with their company culture, or can they?
Well, I think firstly, are we clear of what can we clearly articulate what our culture is? Um,
Mm,
so I think that's important. And then, really, there's nothing better than that personal interaction. When I had the privilege to lead at WD-40 company, our careers page, if you went to it, the first thing that popped up were our values. And
mhm.
it basically said, and this is not verbatim, but it basically said, these are our values. If you don't feel comfortable with these, you won't feel comfortable with us. So is the culture explainable? And are the values clear so that people have a clear understanding of what the acceptable behaviors in the organization are? And do they feel comfortable with them? You know, one of our values at WD-40 was we value creating positive, lasting memories in all of our relationships. Some people had a problem actually understanding what that meant. Did it mean that we always, we never had a conflict? No, it didn't mean that. It meant that we treated people with respect and dignity. And at the end of a conversation, we were able to, you know, leave the room without offense, but knowing why we're there.
Respect and dignity, always returning to those two words. And that sometimes you leave in disagreement still. Sometimes you
Yeah.
don't leave seeing eye to eye, and that can be okay as long as you've handled it in a way where you've been able to bring respect and dignity along into the room. Okay, here's another question. In the context of kind of thinking about commitment equals investment, how do you invest and prioritize creating the conditions for your people to thrive? And another kind of way of looking about that is, how do you know that joy and belonging were embedded into your workplace?
Well, it's all right to have the words, but you've got to act the act. So,
Mhm.
culture in an organization is a shadow of the leadership. Um, and you've got to really not just have these values on a wall or talk about it, but in the daily behaviors of what you do. One of the things that we did at WD-40 Company, particularly around our values, is we asked people on a regular basis, at a minimum of every 90 days, to share with us how they've lived our values in the last 90 days. So give us real examples. And we only had two measurements. We had people who lived them or people who visited them. And we said we didn't want a lot of visitors. So I guess again, it's the words are easy, but the behaviors are important. And that's really how that gets embedded in an organization. And
Hmm.
of course you've got to test it out. There are many ways of taking pulse surveys or whatever to really get a broader feel for what is the condition of your organization. Um, if you only went to the doctor once a year and had your heartbeat checked, would that be okay? Maybe not.
Excellent. We have a couple of people have asked a question that's kind of along a similar theme, which has to do with remote work. And
Mhm.
so I think the idea behind a few of these questions is, one, how do we kind of authentically welcome back remote workers into the workplace, especially if they aren't especially thrilled to be there? And then I think the other part is in this space of remote work is that many of us have remote workplaces. We have, colleagues all across the country, and so that's not going to change. And so, how do you create a culture of belonging in that space?
I think this is a huge challenge that we have right now. That I say this. Ashley's running out the door in the morning. She gives her son a high five and says, "Hey, I'm so excited to go to the office today to meet with fill in the blank because we're going to fill in the blank." My challenge is, what is the fill in the blanks? So, having people come back together to do mundane work that they could do remotely is not the value, but to really create innovation, entrepreneurialism, and to feed that passion for culture, you have to bring people together. But we have to find a way of doing it that's exciting for the people. So, we were, and before COVID, we were a very virtual organization. You know, we had offices in 17 countries around the world, but we had events and rituals that brought people together that were deliberately put in place to build trust and connection amongst the people. So I'm really concerned about this loneliness epidemic that we have right now, and it's true. You know, the biggest portion of people in that Gallup research were that felt disconnected were those under 35, and that's scary. So we've got a challenge there. I don't have the answer yet, and I don't think I ever will. I'm the dumbass, but I could use all the help I can get on this to understand what can we do to bring people together.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have so many thoughtful and wonderful questions coming in. What I did was I tried to take ones that thematically were matching and kind of pose them to Garry, but we also do respect everyone's time. We know so many of you are joining us from all over the country on lunch breaks and afternoon breaks. And so what we'll do is we'll actually give you a few amazing resources right now, and then we will follow up, like I said, with a follow-up email, one that you'll probably get tomorrow that just has the link to this recording as well as the list of the 50 book winners. But then we'll send another one out after Garry and I have a chance to put our heads together and actually get the answers to some of these questions that we haven't done yet. So really quickly, as we close out, let me just share with you that we have a couple of resources for you that I think are really important and significant. So the first one, oh, sorry, you're seeing my whole PowerPoint. You don't need to see all that. Let me get that back up. So we have these free resources for workplace leaders that we have developed at the National Conflict Resolution Center. And our whole purpose here, the whole entire reason that we developed these resources was so that we could share what we know. We could share as trends change and as the ground shifts, as we know, we find articles, we produce videos, for example, during the election, we came up with, 10 tips for navigating the political divide in conversations. So every week we are posting new resources on here. And if you are interested, if you are seeking out resources to kind of help navigate the tumultuous landscape that we're in, we have kind of cultivated this library for you and encourage you to tap into it. We also have something that I think is really interesting and really helpful, which is a certificate program that we've developed for workplace leaders. And it's a 4-part program available to really help kind of tackle these questions, go back for a second, tackle some of the questions we're asking, some of the questions that have been asked here today to Garry and I about, how you navigate this landscape respectfully and with dignity, and being able to embrace when conflict or difficult conversations do come up and handle them in a way that is really effective. So highly encourage you to look into that if that's something that you have been looking at. And then finally, of course, want to share a couple of resources around Garry's new book. As you can see down here on the screen, those were the other 2 books that I mentioned that Garry has already written, but Any Dumbass Can Do It comes out in just a few days. And if you want to order the book or pre-order a copy, there's a QR code here that will take you right to a page where you can do that. Also, Garry, I know you just released a really fun and interesting quiz, and I wonder if you might tell us about that.
Yeah, sure. If you want to get a sample, there'll be a link in the notes there to the Any Dumbass Can You Do It quiz, and you can master your dumbassery. So if you go into that site, it's on my website, www.thelearningmoment.net. You'll see quiz. You'll get the results, and then you'll get a free playbook emailed to you personally that'll give you a little bit of a kickstart on some of the things you might be able to do in your organization to master your dumbassery.
I don't know. Is it going to tell me how much of a dumbass I am, or is it going to, because I
It'll
don't know if
it'll
I want
put
to know that.
well. in a love and in a caring and sharing, respectful way.
There we go. A respectful, dignified way.
Way,
I
exactly.
appreciate that. Yes.
But remember, dumbass is actually a badge of honor.
I love it. And if you want to know more about what that means, I highly encourage you to read the book because that is answered in there. Garry, I cannot thank you enough. I feel a little bit lighter just in our conversation, and I know that this is a really valuable resource for everybody who is on. So thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure. And thank you for inviting me. It's been a delight.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining today. We will follow up with those promised resources. Go out and grab a copy of Garry's book and make sure you tap into our free resources as well. Thanks for joining. Stay tuned for our next webinar, and we will be in touch with you. Take care, everyone.